For people who are living a life where they feel stuck or in fear, that they've been told that they weren't enough, that is my history. That's my story. Until I had an epiphany at the age of 21, after I had luckily graduated from college after 5 years, barely made it, and was working in a record store at the age of 21. And I got a phone call that offered me the opportunity to teach English to Holocaust survivors in a low-income neighborhood of Tel Aviv. And on the airplane, in the middle of a panic attack, I wrote 8 words in a little blue Mead spiral notebook that I had shoved into my backpack. And those 8 words literally changed my life.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project, brains behind the business. It's your front row seat to the business elite. New episodes twice a week.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalvarowski, and as always, the yang to my yin is here, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
I'm actually so excited, and I know it's podcast land, so maybe a little less excitement on a Monday, but here in studio, it's a Friday, and my daughter has her first competitive volleyball tournament this weekend, and I can't even tell you what that means. Well, everybody listening knows my background in sports, so you probably can infer what that means for me as her mom, seeing her step into that high pressure, high stakes environment. But yeah, just the joy that I'm watching her experience as she gets ready. She was up early. She wanted to pepper with me in the hallway. I'm just like, and I know we're not supposed to live vicariously through our children, but I'm catching some of that backdraft, and I am super fired up as a result watching her go through this experience. So
Just
fulfilling.
2 pieces of advice. 1, don't yell at the refs, and 2 is don't fight other parents.
Don't worry. I'll be packing my toolbox because I know just as much mindset work needs to go on from the sidelines as her mother as it does on the court, surely. How about you, sir? How you feeling this Friday?
Well, we have an absolutely special guest. I'm fired up for this one. We got to start off with a quote. And so I have one here from Nelson Mandela. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. And you'll find out shortly why I picked that quote. Our special guest, the author of Scare Your Soul, keynote speaker, Scott Simon is here. Scott, how are you?
Oh, I'm so happy to be with the two of you. I'm doing just great.
Amazing to have you. I know you're going to resonate with that quote. So Scott, I want you to of course I want you to tell us the story of how your courage journey all began.
Rob, thank you. I'm absolutely happy to. I was that kid who was sitting in the back of the room in school, hands folded and face down so that nobody would call on him. I was the shyest, shortest kid in my school and terribly socially anxious. I spent most of my life feeling invisible. I was bullied from the time I was 8 till about 12. And for any of you who have had kids that were bullied or you were bullied yourself, you know that there's a lot of shame that surrounds bullying. And it's the kind of thing you keep to yourself. You don't often talk about it. And that really was my childhood. And so I have great empathy for people who are living a life where they feel stuck or in fear, that they've been told that they weren't enough. That is my history. That's my story. Until I had an epiphany at the age of 21, after I had luckily graduated from college after 5 years, barely made it, and was working in a record store at the age of 21. And I got a phone call that offered me the opportunity to teach English to Holocaust survivors in a low-income neighborhood of Tel Aviv.
Wow.
I had never been to that part of the world. I didn't know the language. I didn't know where I'd be living. I didn't know anything. But for some reason, I said yes. And on the airplane, in the middle of a panic attack, I wrote 8 words in a little blue Mead spiral notebook that I had shoved into my backpack. And those 8 words literally changed my life. And the 8 words were, do one thing every day that scares you. And so for me, that has become a mantra. It's become a way of living. It's become my passion in this world. And so to be able to help other people step into courage, maybe to understand the myths around it and how they may be viewing it incorrectly and maybe can reframe it so that they can step into it more fully, that is, I've got the best job in the world.
We kind of agree, right, Rob? I'm curious if we could back up the game tape a little bit and then around this part of the story where you're on this airplane,
Yeah.
recognizing that for some reason you said yes.
Yeah.
What was the reason this shy, introverted, bullied, full of shame kid
Yeah.
said yes in that moment? What was that reason?
Yeah. I think I'm going to get a little new agey with you. I'm sorry, but
Yes, please. Don't apologize.
I honestly think there are moments in our life where destiny calls, and sometimes we know why it's happening. Sometimes it's a window or a door that opens. We've had a crisis or a tragedy or something has happened where an opportunity comes that just seems absolutely ridiculously impossible. And there's no reason in the world why we should be saying yes. And I don't know if it is the universe or it's our destiny or our path or our journey, or maybe there is some small spark that needs to be flame, the flame needs to be fanned inside of us where we say enough of the fear, enough of saying no. And we step into that moment not knowing what is going to be on the other side. And that space, to me, is a magical space. I think in today's world, we are very focused on outcomes. If we do A and B, then C is going to happen. If I take this class and then I get this grade, then I'm going to get this GPA and get this great job or get into a college, or if I meet this person, then this is going to happen. We're going to get married and we're going to have a happy life. And we're so focused on the outcome on the other side of action that we lose the magical ability to just say yes when we don't know what's going to happen. So to this day, it feels like one of those destined decisions. It still gives me a little butterflies in the stomach to think about it in that moment. But it legitimately changed my life. And each day doing one thing that scared me, and they were small to begin with. Going to the post office for the first time, saying hello to a stranger for the first time, getting on a bus for the first time. Each one of those accrued. And my sense of agency and my sense of self-confidence grew. And by the end of that year, I had fallen in love, traveled the country, met people of all different types of faiths and backgrounds, and I got deep and I got vulnerable and I got passionate. And I came back to the States absolutely on fire and almost like a different person. That experience changed everything about how I viewed myself. And I think it's all open and available to all of us. We just have to get a little brave to be able to step into it.
And Scott, obviously that's rippled out into what you do today. Can you tell us the rest of that story? Like, where have you gone since you were 22?
So the whole concept of pushing a comfort zone every day became a practice. I now view much of my life as helping other people create a practice that is a courage practice, just like people have yoga practices or meditation practices. I began to follow that path. It kept me pushing and prodding and poking and moving throughout my own life and down the path. I ended up meeting an incredible professor at Harvard who had the largest class at Harvard at the time, The Science of Happiness, Tal
Oh, I
Ben-Shahar.
remember that class. Yep. Very famous.
Very famous, and I absolutely lucked out into meeting him when a yoga class I was taking was canceled, and I ended up waltzing into his class and absolutely finding my mentor and someone who has helped guide me. And I became really fascinated about kind of the academics and the science side of growth, of what happens in our brains and our bodies when we're confronted with tough challenges. And when I was 10, I had a choir teacher tell me that I had a terrible singing voice and I should basically mouth the words for the rest of the year. And I didn't sing again for 35 years until one morning I decided to conquer that fear. This is after meeting Tal and getting steeped in positive psychology and in behavior design. And so my way of tackling a fear of singing was to grab an acoustic guitar, find the busiest restaurant in my town.
Whoa.
You anybody listening to this may be getting butterflies in their stomach just thinking about what you would do if you were
Totally.
you had your guitar and you were on your way to a restaurant. And I sang in front of about 100 strangers. And here's the key. I wasn't any good. It wasn't that my voice was magically transformed into this incredible, but in 7 minutes, I took a fear that had been lingering with me for 35 years and it vanished. And not only, it didn't just vanish, it was transformed. It went from a fear to an interest, a passion, something I wanted to do again immediately. And I came home. I was so passionate about what I had just done. And I wrote a Facebook post about it. And the post went viral around the world. It was shared hundreds of times. And by the next morning, I was getting DMs from people all around the world asking me how to get more courageous. How could they do what I did? And I'll be really honest with you. I said, I don't have a damn clue. But let's figure this out and let's do it together. And I think that evening it became, I put together a website, a $14 Squarespace website. I came up with the name Scare Your Soul. It just arrived into my being. And from that day forward, the Scare Your Soul Courage movement has grown and has attracted people from around the world who are just interested in being a little bit braver. And when you do that in small ways and you celebrate it with other people, and I share ideas and thoughts and challenges all the time, it has grown exponentially. And I'm just blown away when I see the passion and the courage that exists within our community.
It's
So
amazing.
good.
And obviously for folks out there, so Scott's doing some keynotes in front of stadiums right now, and he kicks off his show with Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You on acoustic guitar.
I gotta come see a show, Scott.
I actually had the opportunity to give a speech at Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado, and it was one of those out of body experiences where you're speaking to a group of people and you're looking out at them, and I just took a deep breath and I looked around. And for anybody who's been to Red Rocks, and you just feel this sense of awe, and so to be able to speak to people about something so uniquely human. This is not something that you need an education for, or some sort of a degree, or some sort of life experience. This is something we all have inside of us right now. And to access it and do it together, it enlivens relationships, it enlivens careers, it enlivens families. Those of us who are parents, we're probably avoiding some conversations that we could or should be having with our kids. We or with our significant others. I did get a phone call at one point from one of our ambassadors who shared with me that she had a Scare Your Soul baby. And I said to her, had to take a breath, I will admit. And I said, could you tell me, what does that mean? Do you have a Scare Your Soul baby? Tell me more. And she told me that one of our weekly challenges a couple of years before was to have a tough conversation with a significant other, which is part and parcel of leading a courageous life. And she had one that week with her then husband and told him that their relationship just was not working. And turns out he agreed. They'd both been putting off having the conversation. And they got separated and divorced, and it was a tough time for her. And in the midst of her kind of healing and grieving, she reconnected with a dear friend. It turns out it was an old high school boyfriend that had just moved back to California. And lo and behold, that ex-boyfriend became a new husband and the father of their baby. And so she was very kind in telling me that it wasn't quite because of me and because of Scare Your Soul, but we prompted her to have that conversation and think of the ripples that exist when we do brave things in this world. Absolutely amazing.
I want to talk about this word destiny that you threw into the mix here. And you're talking about scaring your soul. So yes, that gets a little metaphysical for people. But in the context of high performance, in hockey, we were always told to go out there every day and find our edges. And what that meant was like we had to look for where we were afraid to go in our skill development, right? Because that was a ticket to the growth zone. We knew that you were guaranteed to tap into more of that unrealized potential when you actually found your edges in terms of the fear. But when we're talking about that in the context of destiny and your soul, do you believe that our greatest fears have something to do with our purpose and why we're here?
Oh, I love that question so much. It's funny, and I think you're absolutely right. I feel like this work operates on so many levels, and I do, of course, work with CEOs and with companies. I was with a big entrepreneur organization last night, having an amazing courage experience together. And I think certainly courage work exists on the tactical level. There are absolutely ways for us to step into our careers and our workplaces in more courageous ways. There's incredible work that is being done in that area. But I also think this does exist at the soul level. And I think the greatest insight that I got that first year when I was doing one thing every day that scared me was I would walk away from my edges. I would move away from my edges. Edges are uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Edges sometimes invite failure. Mm-hmm. Edges sometimes invite rejection. Edges don't make us feel like we're living with mastery. Mm-hmm. And so it is, I think, both societally and human nature wise, we are driven towards that comfort center where we feel secure and we feel like we can operate in a zone of genius. And that's absolutely to be expected. And I think our bodies and our brains consistently push us in that direction. However, that, in my view, is not the seat of innovation. That is not the seat of creativity. That is not the seat of deep connection and truth. That all exists on those edges. And I think it takes a real practice, just like my son decided that he wanted to run a half marathon and had never really run before. And so those first couple weeks were strapping shoes on and getting out there and feeling uncomfortable and feeling like a failure, feeling like this is not my thing. But if you keep at it and you continue to build the muscle and continue to build the stamina, all of a sudden you're crossing the finish line that you've set for yourself, whether it's in your professional life, whether it's in your personal life. And that is such an important lesson for this work, that when we do feel that we are destined, all of us, to lead a passionate, interactive, wise, loving, brave existence, and that nothing else is going to suffice, we have to live at those edges. And if you're going to live that life, you are going to be afraid. So your question is so beautiful, because I think when we're afraid, we look to all kinds of different sources to allow us to step into that moment. We look to self-confidence. We look to what we've done in the past. We look to our networks, right? We look to people around us who can support us. But I think we really do have to look inside and say, what does my soul want? Who am I on this earth? What do I and what can I achieve? And what do I need to do that? And that to me is, people talk about the dash. I went to a funeral one time and there was a beautiful eulogy that used this concept of the dash. The dash is the thing between the day on your tombstone from when you were born, the year that you were born, and the year that you died. Okay? We can't control the first and we can't control the last. What we can control is the dash in between. What happens between those dates is ours. We own that time. And so how do you want to live it? And I want to live it on my edge. And that brings up all kinds of amazing fears, joys, progress, tragedy, relationships, and that to me is life. That's the dash.
The dash. We got to steal that one from you. Hey, Rob, we got to bring that one into our locker rooms for damn sure. I love it.
Scott, I always think about this as there's that step, right? And Susan experienced this because I took her parasailing when she came down.
That was more than an edge.
But
just saying.
It's there's that moment where you jump off the cliff, and then and everything inside of you is screaming not to do it. But then there's the catch, and there's that freedom on the other side. How do you describe that when you make that leap? What's on the other side for you?
Again, what a beautiful, beautiful question. I think that is that visual of you're inching towards the end of the cliff. You've got this thing on your back. You're about ready to launch. And everything inside of you is saying, what the hell are you doing? You know what? If you uncoupled yourself and walked backwards, there's probably a Mai Tai in close proximity, or a nice kava, mocktail, really close. Why would you do that thing? And I think that is the essential moment. That is the moment of our lives. And anybody who has become a parent, and you look at this little being in front of you, that is the same moment. It is leaping off of the cliff without having any damn clue what is going to be on the other side. And anybody who's a parent knows. Is it terrifying? Yes. Are there twists and turns to come? Absolutely. Will this probably be one of the most joyous and edifying experiences of your entire life? Hell yes, it will be. And so I think your question is so to the heart of our existence. We live that life so deeply when we can inch up to that cliff and launch ourselves off. And that takes guts. It takes a level of faith or optimism. It takes hope. It takes a zest for life, because anybody who has done anything like that knows, and I mean both small actions and big ones. And just like me, when I pulled that guitar out of the case in front of the restaurant, I had a moment where I could literally have turned around, and believe me, I thought about it. and walked back to my car, and no one would have ever known except one person, me. And that to me is where we start to see courage exist. When no one else knows, when no one else sees, and you are stepping into a moment of courage, either in your business or in a moment of service, or in a moment where growth is in the offing. And when we do it, we feel Rob, there is that, like, whatever, let's say like that 10 seconds between when you launch off to when it catches, and you say to yourself, I'm out now. You're not feeling comfortable yet, but you've done it. And then all of a sudden the current just starts to carry you. And I'm addicted to that. I'll be honest with you. Not in terms of being like an ultra athlete or anything, but in terms of life. You know, when I'm speaking in front of, I couldn't speak in front of 3 people when I was young. And so now to speak in front of 3,000, it feels so incredibly powerful and joyous, and I feel like I'm in service in that moment. And that is and everybody has access to that every day, and it's just incredibly powerful and beautiful.
And to think fear robs us of that invigoration, right? Like how I felt after my little tiny footsteps took me off the edge. And I was like, literally took the smallest steps because I was like not ready to leave the ground. But when I started to ascend, that's when you feel fully alive. That's when you feel so expansive. I literally said to myself, I could do anything if I could jump off this damn cliff in Costa Rica right now, you know? And so it's such a crime that our fear can rob us of that privilege.
And it does so in the most important parts of our lives, in our relationships, our relationship with ourselves and with others, and in our work life, in how we exert leadership. I spoke to a CEO of a biomedical company recently, and he told me the story that he had the idea for a protocol, a drug, and he was working for another company and went to the leadership. He was the medical director at the time, and proposed this, and basically said that it was all fear-based. They declined. They said, it's too much of a risk. He said, trust me, this drug is absolutely necessary. And they declined, which he said to me the other day was probably a $5 billion mistake. And he is now in another role and doing such incredible work. So this has real world implications. This is in both the positive and the negative. And I'm not suggesting that every courageous action leads to the outcome we want. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea to say that let's just take risks everywhere we go. There are real fears that keep us safe, both physically and emotionally, and of course economically, that financially, that keep us and our families safe. But then there are so many fears, many of them in the workplace, that I call toxic fears, which are ruminations about what could happen in the future, maybe based on some either stories or maybe limited past experiences, or worries about how we're going to be viewed by others or how we deal with failure. And those toxic fears just represent this unbelievable obstacle in front of us. And so when I work with groups and work with companies and work with individuals or give keynotes, I feel like there's such a sense of relief when we all talk about this, when you realize we're all dealing with this. This isn't just, the CEO is worried about, some strategic decision that needs to be made, or talking to her board and telling them that something was a failure or that they didn't hit their numbers for the year. This exists at all levels, from the day you're onboarded to the day you retire and then beyond. And so we're all in this together. We all feel these feelings. And so if we can acknowledge it and push through and find our accountability partners or find our partners, we start to make bold decisions that I think lead to beautiful careers, beautiful relationships. And again, it goes back to that dash. That's what
Yeah.
happens in the dash.
I
Yeah.
love that. And obviously, we got to give a little time for this. So you're working on a new book about questions for life. And you mentioned also that it was driven by destiny. So tell us a little bit about that.
Clearly, we're talking about destiny today. I love it. This is great. So, when I was growing up, I had, as I told you before, very few friends. And there were certain times in my life where I had no friends and I was eating lunch in school cafeterias by myself. My family became my best friends, my parents, my siblings, my grandparents. And we used to have something every week, which we called FNO, Family Night Out. And we would all go out together, and it would be an opportunity to kind of get out of the house. And we used to bring a book with us to Family Night Out, and it was called The Book of Questions. It was written by a guy named Greg Stock, and I can literally remember it was this tiny little paperback with one question per page. Okay? Open it up to any page, and you're going to get a great question that the entire family could talk about for like an hour. And this is a very light one, but a question might be, if you had to move to Alaska and live in an igloo with one person for a year, who would it be and why? Okay?
Got it.
Feel free to think
got
about
it.
that one. Okay?
Got
Bear
it.
Is it a
Grylls.
friend? Is it a child? Is it a dog? Is it a right?
Rob's bringing Winston for sure.
All right, Winston is coming with Rob. Okay, that was an easy one.
I have to
So-
bring my daughter.
Okay, so great, really great questions, and it was like every time we read and answered a question, you were finding more out about yourself and you were finding more out about other people. And it was this beautiful way of pre-cell phone, pre-iPad of connecting with our family. And this book became kind of like our Bible. It was really something super important to us. Let's see, fast forward about 4 decades. I was on a Zoom call about a year ago with 200 people. And the gentleman who was leading the Zoom call, it was all about leadership, said, "Hey, everybody, Greg Stock, who wrote the Book of Questions, is on the Zoom. Hey, Greg." And my heart stopped for a second. And I was like, because I never even thought of actually meeting Greg Stock, and that even like he existed beyond this like cult status in my family. So immediately, of course, I go into the chat on Zoom and I sent him a DM and I said, "I just want you to know your book seriously changed my family's life."
Aw.
And he texted back and said, "Who are you? And what do you do?" And I said, "I'm Scott Simon. I run a global courage movement." And he said, "Wow, that sounds kind of interesting. Why don't we connect?" And so we did. And one Zoom led to another and then another. He is a Harvard MBA. He started a school at UCLA Medical School. He is a brilliant AI futurist, one of the most fascinating, brilliant people I've ever met. And in the course of our burgeoning friendship and talking about fear, courage, questions, he said to me one day, "I haven't really done, a full sequel to the Book of Questions, thinking about the concept of courage. How would you like to co-write a book of courageous questions?"
Ooh.
So taking the original concept from the mid 80s and bringing it into what will be 2025. And at a time when now we look to our phones for answers, we look to our streaming channels, our news channels for answers. We think we have our own answers to everything. And I think in many ways have forgotten the power of questions. And so Greg and I are now co-writing the Book of Courageous Questions, which I hope will be out next year. And in my mind is going to be a game changer in the way people relate. I can literally imagine 2 people walking into a coffee shop, getting a coffee, Strangers sitting down at a table, and there happens to be the book of courageous questions. They open to page 44 and sit there for a half an hour getting to know each other over one question. And so I think the kind of destiny of Greg Stock being part of my family's life, meeting him on a Zoom, and then now unbelievably working on a book together feels destined and feels absolutely right.
I love it. All right. Well, I've got the power question for you, sir, given that you just wrote a whole book on courageous questions. I'm curious what you want the legacy of your dash to be. So when you play the game tape forward and you go all the way up and to the right to the rocking chair, and you imagine that ripple effect that has ensued from the way that you showed up courageously, what do you envision that to be someday?
I know exactly what it is.
Woo!
and it came to me in the first week after I had started Scare Your Soul. And I knew it the minute that it happened. And just to give people context, Scare Your Soul is nothing but a community of people that offer each other permission slips to be more brave every single day. We create challenges, we support each other. There's a weekly newsletter that has a challenge in it. If people want to do the challenge, that's great. If not, it may remind them to do something brave that day. And so we're this very organic and beautiful community that anybody is welcome to join. And when I had started Scare Your Soul after singing in front of this restaurant, somebody sent me an email that week. So 1 week in, and it started this way. Hi, Scott, comma, I scared my soul today by ... And I thought to myself, that is my legacy. If by the time my dash is reaching its end, if there could be a substantial part of this world that said to each other, I scared my soul today, my work here will have been well spent. Because what that means is I just did something that pushed me, that scared me, and something really worthy happened because of it. And I get emails and texts and DMs constantly that begin that way. Hi, Scott, comma, I scared my soul today by. People who said, I love you first. People who quit jobs. People who decided to have a family. I got one the other day from an 82-year-old woman who said, I scared my soul today by saying yes to playing pickleball with my friends, even though I didn't know how to play and I thought I would fail. And I love hearing that people quit their jobs or start a new company or say, I love you, but it also literally is like a nugget of gold to me when somebody says, I played pickleball today at the age of 82 because of you, because of Scare Your Soul, and this concept that yes, I can step into a moment, per Rob's comment from the Nelson Mandela quote, which is so beautiful, that it's not about crushing fear, imploding fear. It's about feeling it and stepping into it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I really believe my work in this world is to help people scare their souls every day. And then the rest of the world gets to be the beneficiaries of that.
I love it.
So cool. What a great mission. Of course, for folks out there, so I've dropped Scott's LinkedIn in the podcast notes, but you can also go to scareyoursoul.com. By the time you're listening to this, the paperback version of Scare Your Soul is out. So check that out. Obviously, you can find that anywhere, but scareyoursoul.com, you can buy it there. Susan, where do you want to leave our folks today?
So interesting, because intuitively, I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately. It's just, I always say to my clients, the best way to get what you don't want is to fear it. I need to start saying is to stay in the fear of it, because when you actually do what Scott is suggesting we do in relation to our fear, when you actually tap into and into it, you can hear the whispers of your soul. You can feel that intuitive knowingness that there's something really good on the other side of that edge. And so I know when I look back at my hero's journey and my timeline, answering that call to courage that I now recognize my fear to be has been the portal to my potential, has been the portal to that flight path to legacy. So I love this discussion so much because it completely resonates with where my soul clearly is at these days. And I have a feeling a lot of our listeners too. How about you, Rob?
For me, it's back to where we think about parts. And it's exactly what Scott's talking about. There's a part of you that's afraid because it wants to protect you from something. And when we lean in with curiosity and compassion, often we can find out what that is, and then our self can choose to lead ourselves in the best way for us to reach that legacy and that destiny. And it's not easy, but the magic is in doing the work and taking that step off the cliff, because you never know what you'll find on the other side. Scott, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. You're awesome, and I really love the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. It's so great being with the two of you, and I'm just thrilled to be able to talk about this work, which feels so vital and powerful at this time in our world.
Amen.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.